Ha ha ha. Hi everyone, Butthany here, Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Foo Fighters album, but here we are. This is the newest full-length album from veteran alt-rock outfit Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl and the band, they're back for their 11th record, and it's quickly proving to be one of their best in a while. Definitely a bounce back following the dismal run of albums post the career highlight Wasting Light in 2011. I don't think it's controversial to say that the multi-location HBO tie-in Sonic Highways was kind of a bland dip in quality. Concrete and Gold after that wasn't much better. And then Medicine at Midnight showed things getting even more stale with the occasional track that worked in more of a dance beat, which I think was, a bit of a tough sell for a Foo Fighters record. The band continued to yuck it up in this lane for a little bit longer with a release that had a bunch of disco covers on it too, under the name DGs. Even if around this time the Foos were not putting out their best material, they were at least riding a celebratory high of success. And being one of the few bands to navigate the treacherous post-grunge commercial radio rock landscape of the 2000s with their creative freedom and relevancy still intact. However, things for the band would take a very sudden and a very dark turn with the passing of longtime drummer Taylor Hawkins in 2022, who many of the tracks on this record are clearly in tribute to. But Here We Are is very much a record about loss and learning from loss, with some tracks clearly trying to reach across the great beyond to Taylor in song. I also want to make note that the recent passing of Dave Grohl's mother also had a huge impact on this record's themes of loss. And it's impressive that Dave and company were able to pull this off with very minimal alterations to their sound. We have 10 pretty cut and dry alt-rock tracks on here that don't spend too much time meandering or expanding, with the exception of one that we will get into later. So structurally, this record is pretty much what you would expect from a Foos album. On top of that, Dave historically isn't the most specific lyricist too, so I was curious as to how he would address Taylor and his passing through this project. And I wouldn't say he digs too deep into anything private on this record. Much of the time, lyrically, I feel like what we're getting are inferences, but those inferences are very clear and very big, be it on the anthemic opener Rescue, where Dave roars over these jangly walls of guitar about a change that was very sudden, came by in a flash, and needing to be rescued and brought back to life as a result of this change. This and the song Under You may come from a sadder place than most Foos tracks, but they still bring a lot of straightforward riffs and chord progressions, almost like the band is trying to address what happened while simultaneously fulfilling expectations that they come through with a record that rocks. Thankfully, a lot of the deeper cuts on this project are much better at wearing their heart on their sleeve. There's the very haunting hearing voices, which I suppose in the grander scheme of things isn't that much more detailed lyrically, but Dave's aggressively stated lines about hearing voices still hit, especially as he kind of coasts down into this post-chorus passage about how, yes, hearing the voices, but none of them are you. The Glass is a track that kicks off with these really crispy acoustic guitars that are busting out these chords that sound like your typical 2000s radio rock ballad. Kind of predictable, but it's a formula that works for Foo Fighters, one that they obviously had a huge hand in perfecting over the years. They know the ins and outs of it, so when they add bittersweet melodies into the track and some organ keys, it's tasteful and it works. The lyrics on this track are pretty solid too, especially ones about seeing a vision of you or having a version of a home at one point and losing that. And these visions to Dave as he's singing about them are so real, are so intense. He should be able to touch them or interact them, and yet there is something between him and that thing that he's wanting to connect with, a wall, some glass. The very smooth and moody Show Me How has grown on me since I first heard it as a single too. We have some of the most expressive guitar leads on the entire LP, plus some additional vocals from Dave Grohl's daughter in the mix. And this track for me really adds to the track list overall because it's a nice coast down into the final moments of the record, which are some of the most emotionally potent on the entire LP. And let me tell you, this album really does nail the landing, with moments like the 10-minute The Teacher, which I know the Foo Fighters aren't typically the kind of band you expect a 10-minute song from that has multiple phases, but they actually pull it off miraculously without getting too flashy or proggy or, low-key or experimental or anything like that. There are a few cycles of the same verses and refrains, but the band slowly gets louder and more intense playing them. Then we erupt into this dreamy rock passage with calls of wake up, wake up, wake up, a sinister and descending chord progression that's actually legitimately nightmarish. We continue from here into some crushing riff passages, some more spot-lit and stripped-back guitars that sound like something out of a Floyd record, which the band builds up from into a powerful finish. All these group vocals drenched in reverb, saying goodbye, goodbye. It sounds like the song is crossing over into the spiritual plane just before the entire track just gets swallowed in this deafening distortion. The closing track, Rest, is another, again, emotionally potent moment, and I think one of the clearest on the record in terms of its intentions. Dave is literally singing on the track, "Rest, you can rest now." It's really a final goodbye, clearly, and it's another moment on the record where the distortion is so brittle and it's so dense and so heavy, it feels like I'm just, sonically speaking, looking at a blinding light just enveloping everything. And generally the production on this thing is pretty thick and is pretty fuzzy, maybe to a fault here and there, to where the record, I think, loses some body, some dynamics, but not so much so that the band can't work in some extra vocal layers or some keys or some guitar leads when they want to. For such a mellow and moody album, it has quite a bit of bite to it. It's kind of thunderous occasionally too. Maybe not quite at that Wasting Light level of grit, but I don't think anybody expected that out of this project anyway. But again, some of the saddest and most passionate moments on this record tend to be the most fiery, like Beyond Me. But yeah, overall I thought this was a really great album from Foo Fighters. Pretty much every chorus on this thing is solid as a rock. And again, the more personal and emotional angles of these songs I think work. The 10-minute epic track toward the back end I think goes over without a hitch. This is certainly Foo Fighters, I think, at their most emotionally vulnerable, and they're sounding fantastic doing it. I'm feeling a light 8 on this project. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head, it's another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Foo Fighters, forever.